then let us start the last session. Okay, then let's start with the last session of the afternoon by the presentation of Martin Giese, who is a professor at the University Clinic of Tübingen.
Yeah, first I want to thank Jean-Paul and the organizers that they invited me to this fantastic symposium. So the topic of my talk is modeling of coordinated human body motion by learning of structure dynamic representation. So basically it's also more on the side of neuroscience than of robotics. So if you look at natural human movements and animal movements, they are highly structured and complex. And in biology, this is often analyzed in terms of this classical idea of movement primitives, where people understand partially very different things by movement primitives. So one conception is this idea that you have temporal segmentation in individual actions and sequencing of actions like you have in this Taekwondo form here. And the other thing that is frequently used is this idea what we call spatial primitives. So this is the idea that you have spatial components that in some way are forming modules of control. And this allows animals, as you see in this cat here, to do basically at the same time multiple tasks which are partially spatially overlapping, partially temporally overlapping. There's a very complex structure, coordination structure underlying this. And obviously for technical application, it's interesting to model such behaviors. And to do this for online applications and applications in robots, you have to do this by modeling this in terms of dynamical or control systems. We use learning-based approaches and try to basically, based on biological principles, try to come up with flexible learning-based representations of complex behaviors. In the following, I will show you two approaches that we are taking to do this, and we have different applications. One is really to generate movements that can be used as planning for real robots. We also have done quite a lot of work on coordination, for instance, between multiple humans, looking at coordination, for instance, of crowds of locomoting humans. And another domain that I will show you is this synthesis of interactive movements of humans, for instance, expressing emotions by body movements, which is challenging because you need here not only to control the basic action, but you need also to control the style of the action, which requires a high accuracy. And you need, if you want to model interactive behavior, again, you need to generate this behavior online as kind of form of a control loop. So I will first show you one approach that we are taking where we have developed online generative models of complex coordinated behaviors based on the special form of learned dynamic primitives. I will then briefly show you how this concept can be embedded in a real robot control architecture. This is work that we do together here with LAS in Toulouse. And then finally, I want to show you also another approach that we are following using probabilistic models, hierarchical probabilistic models, to model such emotional interactions, mainly for experiments, perception experiments that we do with humans. So the concept on which these dynamic primitives are based is this idea of spatial movement primitives, which are originally coming from biology. So most people here probably know that there is classical work, for instance, by Giese, who showed that you can decompose the motor behavior of organisms into the muscle commands. If you record many muscles simultaneously, you can approximate these high-dimensional muscle patterns by superposition of relatively few components, which are also called muscle synergy. So this suggests that the control space is much lower dimensional than you would expect from the dimensionality of the number of muscles involved. Basically, these components here were typically learned from experimental data by applying different forms of dimension reduction methods such as NMF or ICA. And we have basically applied similar approaches to human joint angle trajectories and testing different unsupervised learning methods. What we found is that you get particularly compact representations of really complex kinematic patterns if you use this type of generative model, which is known from acoustics as anechoic demixing model. So basically the idea is you have your joint angle. This is represented by a linear mixture of source functions, but you allow that these source functions are also shifted in time. So you have basically to estimate from your data the mixing weight, the form of the source function, and these mixing delays. And basically, when we started this work, there were no algorithms available to do this for data or for dimension reduction problems. So we had to come with our own algorithm, and we developed one that was based on the Wigner-Wille integral transform. So this is time-frequency transformation. So you can take the generative model, you transform it in time-frequency space, and then the idea was that we marginalize out the time argument by taking the integral, and then you get basically positive demixing problem plus a phase retrieval problem. And with this, then we were able to solve basically or estimate these parameters. Meanwhile, we have a new algorithm that is easier and much more robust than this classical Wigner-Wille-based algorithm. And what we found then for many different types of motion is that with this anechoic demixing model, you get a better approximation than with many other classical methods like PCA or ICA. So you see that with very few source functions like 2 or 3, you get almost already perfect reproduction of the kinematics. You see this also in these animations here. Here you see the grayish thing in the background is a ground truth, and basically what is in the front in blue or red is a approximation using either 3 sources with our algorithm or a PCA model with the same number of estimated parameters. You see that this is better than the PCA representation. So the idea is that this algorithm leads to very compact models, which for some applications is really important. One application where this compactness is important is if you want to interpret basically these components. We have done this extensively in a project on emotional gates. So what you can do is you can basically learn such models for emotional gates, and then basically you try to find out basically again using machine learning what the critical features are in the weight space. And basically what you find is that in this anechoic mixture model, what mainly goes with the emotion are the mixing weights, but not the delays and the forms of the sources. Then you can look basically, you can do a kind of sparse regression on the mixing weight to identify the critical features in weight space. And what you get from this is this nice chart that shows you for different emotions here, the different contributions of different joints that are critical or that show the highest variance. So you see, for instance, for happiness, you have a strong elbow movement, or fear, sadness, you have less movement in particular joints, and so on. So this is one application where this compact representation helps you, because if you don't have compact representations, your variance gets distributed among many different synergies or different sources, and then it's very difficult to interpret that. This shows some more recent work where we looked at coordination of periodic motion and reaching in very controlled VR setup, where a person is basically here on a treadmill and has to reach to virtual objects to manipulate basically the timing between reaching and the walking, synchronized with walking. And there we applied this extension or new version of the algorithm, which is based on a special type of Fourier, truncated Fourier representation that leads to regularization in frequency space, has much less parameters, and this way is much more robust. This shows a comparison of this new algorithm. This is the accuracy of the recovered synergies or sources as a function of the noise levels here, that the new algorithm is much more robust or much more accurate than the classical algorithm based on Wigner-Wille transformation, other competitive algorithms that we have tested. Again, also for this example here, we find basically that with very few synergies, here only 2, we can almost perfectly, or 3, we can perfectly approximate this data. And the next slide shows you again that this compactness leads to interpretability. So these are the recovered primitives or source functions with our algorithm father. This is this new algorithm. There you find only 2 mainly relevant sources. One is a non-periodic source and the other one is a periodic source, which directly maps onto the periodic behavior, the walking and the reaching. If you do PCA or ICA, you need many more components, and you get here a distribution of the variance over these components, and the individual components are very difficult to interpret. So this shows basically that for these types of applications where you want to interpret, it makes a big difference which unsupervised learning method you use. And you can, if you use the right one, get relatively well interpretable results. We have seen this with many other types of motions as well. Yeah? So this is not only for this reaching and walking. We have meanwhile developed a toolbox with this algorithm, where the nice thing is that this toolbox allows you to specify many other algorithms as special cases of this anechoic demixing models. You can then run, for instance, ICA or PCA or time variant synergies and so on. There's a whole zoo of these unsupervised learning methods in literature using basically the same core algorithm, which then allows you to check which algorithm fits the data best without having differences in the details of the algorithm. So this is basically now so far a method to model kinematics offline by superposition of these sources. But if you want to use this to control basically systems or in real-time applications, you need to transform this in some way into a dynamical system. To do this, what we are doing is we have again our anechoic mixture model that is learned from kinematics. And what we do is we learn mappings from basically canonical dynamical systems where we are relatively free how we choose these mathematically. So we can choose systems that have nice mathematical properties. And then we learn a nonlinear regression onto these source functions from the trajectories in the state space of these systems. We use in this implementation support vector regression, but you could use another nonlinear regression method. In this way, we can then online synthesize the sources, and using the mixture model, we can online synthesize basically the kinematics or joint angle trajectories. And the nice thing is now, so this is very similar to this classical dynamical primitive approach that you know from Stefan Schaal, Auke Eisbert, and so on, just that we here have not the shape of the trajectory embedded in the canonical dynamics. So basically, the nice thing about the simplicity of these canonical dynamics is now that we can embed such canonical dynamics in bigger networks. So we can now, for instance, have here a whole set of such articulating characters being generated, the movements by a coupled set of such learned primitives. Here you have basically for each of these characters is driven by here 3 of these canonical primitives, and then we can couple these primitives basically by dynamic couplings and can generate in this way collective behaviors that look relatively natural. So this is fully self-organized. Yeah? So this is not learned from motion capturing crowds or something like that. One can easily combine then these types of architectures also, for instance, with simple navigation dynamics. This uses a navigation dynamics that approximates human behavior by Bill Warren. The idea here is that we basically morph between straight steps and steps that are going basically around the corner, and then we steer the mixing weights dynamically by such navigation dynamics. We can also, again, with this now model much more complex behaviors. This is now like a kind of figure from a folk dance where you have one couple that forms a bridge and the others basically crouch and move under this bridge. And basically, again, by now defining the appropriate controller for these mixing weights, we can generate this behavior using only 4 primitives, where 3 primitives are periodic and one is non-periodic, which does basically this arm movement. You see here the loadings of the primitives on the different joints. So the non-periodic one loads here mainly on the shoulder, which makes intuitively sense, and the other ones load here on the whole body. So you see that by this architecture, you can really model in a structured way really complex behaviors. This allows to also then self-organize really complex behaviors of crowds. So here you see basically a crowd that sorts by this self-organization itself in a particular formation and then basically keeps moving forward in this formation. And this whole model integrates the full articulation. So it's not like we just model the center of the body and then approximate something, but the full propagation articulation dynamics is modeled here. This system here has 4 control levels, one that controls the phase of this canonical dynamics, which is a nonlinear oscillator, one that does the speed control by control of the eigenfrequency of the oscillator, one that controls speed by step size, morphing between steps of different size, and one that controls the heading direction, which basically does this navigation part. in spite of this relatively complex architecture, the underlying mathematical models are still relatively simple. And what you see here is a model that basically models such behavior of a crowd moving along a straight line. And you see that you can concatenate this in two equations that are still relatively simple. There is a strong nonlinearity here given by this function g, which basically is the speed, propagation speed, as a function of where you are in the gate cycle. And then basically we have this system of two coupled differential equation, which is simple enough that we can do some stability analysis of such collective behaviors. And the key mathematical tool that we used to do this is contraction theory, which maybe many people know here. So this is a form of stability analysis that has been developed by Jean-Jacques Slotine from MIT. So for the people who don't know this, the idea of contraction theory is that if you analyze the stability of such a dynamical system, you don't compute the stationary solution, then perturb the stationary solution. But instead what you do is you look at trajectories with different initial conditions, and then you analyze how the difference between these trajectories over time evolves. So if this exponentially converges to zero, then basically this system is called contracting. And basically, if this is fulfilled for any pair of initial conditions from a contraction region, then basically the system is called contracting in this region. This is a theory, central theorem from this theory that basically links the eigenvalues of the symmetrized Jacobian of the system to the contraction property of the system. So basically, if the eigenvalues of the symmetrized Jacobian are uniformly negative, then basically you can show that the solution has only a single stable solution. You can not only show this, you can also bound basically the convergence rate of the system basically by the maximum eigenvalue of this matrix here, leading to a kind of minimum contraction rate of this system. So basically, why is it helpful to use contraction theory? There are two reasons from my point of view. One is that often this analysis for applications in neuroscience at least is mathematically easier than the classical approach, where you often have already enormous problems to compute the stationary solution. And the second thing, which I think is even more important, is that contraction theory, opposed to classical nonlinear stability analysis, has a property that you can transfer results from parts of systems to composite systems, which I think is critical if you want to analyze complex systems. So basically you can, if you have contracting components, give conditions how you have to couple them so that the overall system, composite system, is also contracting. And that's basically what we used for the analysis of such crowd behavior. And this shows you now an example of this analysis, which is a crowd that basically locomotes and then synchronizes. What you see here is basically comparison between the simulation results here, these stars where we simulated the dynamics using avatars, and the analytical solution for this example here these are these curves for different coupling topologies, how you couple these agents. Of course, this contraction or the rate depend on the coupling topology. You see here basically how it depends on the number of agents, and this is basically contraction rate. This shows you an animation of this. So this is now here such a crowd with 49 of these agents that are interacting in case the contraction conditions are fulfilled, and then we can violate this contraction condition, which then leads to kind of catastrophic behavior where this synchronization gets destroyed. Here this is what happens if you violate the contraction condition for the phase dynamics. You can violate it also for the other dynamical levels. Here's an example what happens if you violate for eigenfrequency. So you see that we can here do some mathematical characterization for collective behaviors where we really take the full articulation into account. So there's a lot of stuff of consensus behavior in mathematics, but often these models only have very simple agents that have maybe angle and position in 2D, but not ones that articulate. So this shows you basically that we can use these dynamical primitives learned from kinematics to model really complex behaviors, coordinated behaviors within individual agents, or even for interactive behavior of multiple agents. And I want to show you now briefly some work that we did together here with the LAS in Toulouse to embed such an architecture in a robot. And basically the idea of this work was to model human behavior for coordination of reaching and walking. So what you find in humans, this is based on experiments that were done in Bielefeld by the group of Thomas Schack. So if you have basically a person walking to a drawer and look over multiple steps, what happens is that already the multiple steps before you reach this drawer are changing dependent on the goal position. And what you find is basically shown here for the human data. You see that here the last step almost is not adjusted, but what is mainly adjusted dependent on the goal distance is the second last step. In motor control, the explanation for this is that you kind of try to achieve for the action in the last step kind of maximum comfort. Yeah? So basically you place yourself at the distance where the reaching is maximally simple. This is the so-called end-state comfort hypothesis that has been formulated by Rosenbaum and others. And we wanted in some way to reproduce this in a robot based on such a primitive-based framework. What we did then is basically we learned a primitive-based model for the online generation of this behavior. The idea is here that we again learn such sources using here a stepwise regression approach where we first approximate the first step of this approaching sequence, in this case by 4 primitives, where one is again non-periodic, and then we use the residuals and approximate them by 2 additional sources, so this number of doses is optimized to have highly accurate approximation and minimum number of sources. And with this basis, then we can basically approximate this whole behavior, and we can synthesize this behavior online again by basically learning control functions for the individual mixing weights. So what you see here are the mixing weights as a function of the length of the step and as a function of the duration of the individual step. And you see you can learn such nonlinear functions that then allow you online to control these mixing weights and to adjust to different situations. The final algorithm also contains an additional component that allows to introduce additional steps if you are very far from the goal and you don't reach it with the 3 steps, and you can introduce an additional step. With this then we get very flexible behavior. This is illustrated here. So first I forgot to say what you saw here in the beginning. This is already behavior that is online synthesized, so this is not the human motion capture data, and the goal distances that are here were not in the training set. Yeah, so this shows that this algorithm generates very human-like motion adapting to different distances, and basically the full algorithm is even able to online adjust this if the goal object is jumping. Yeah, so it introduces then automatically the appropriate number of steps to reach the goal. So basically, to link now this algorithm to the real HRP2 robot, what you have to do is first we retarget the motion, extracting basic coordinate of pelvis from the human and computing joint angles on the correct HRP2 skeleton. And you have to rescale basic step sizes and durations to make it feasible for the robot. And then basically what we have done is, together with the people here in Toulouse, is to embed this kinematic online synthesis algorithm as a component into the control architecture for the HRP2 that guarantees basically dynamic stability during walking. And the idea is illustrated in this diagram here. So this is basically our online synthesis algorithm, which then computes basically as the reference values for the center of mass and pelvis trajectory for the walking pattern generator that is basically part of the existing architecture, and which basically also provides in the reference trajectories for the upper body angles, which then are mixed basically with stably planned walking step, basically resulting in center of mass ZMP trajectory, which then is mixed together using dynamic filter step into a robot motion that is dynamically feasible. So this walking pattern generator basically gets as input the center of mass trajectory and pelvis velocities, outputs basically foot placement and ZMP trajectory for the actual step, and is based on algorithms originally by Giese and refinements by Weber, and a modern version of this whole architecture you find in this paper by Navot. Then the dynamic filtering step integrates the center of mass and ZMP trajectory with the trajectory of the upper body. The output space is center of mass trajectory that guarantees dynamic stability. Again, these are the works from here, partially, that describe the details. This shows you now basically the result of this system for this sequence that I showed to you on the HRP2 dynamic simulator. So you see we can achieve here kind of human-like behavior that integrates also the stability constraints of the robot. And basically Albert, who developed from our side these algorithms, came here to now implement it basically on the robot. So the implementation of the robot is going on very soon. So this leads me to the conclusions of the first part of my talk. So I think what this probably suggests is that models based on learned movement primitives are useful for devising flexible generative models of naturally appearing or human-like complex body movements. Basically, the idea was that we map kinematic primitives onto dynamical primitives that then can be embedded in networks, if you want, of dynamic primitives that by self-organization generate complex behaviors in a more or less adaptive way. I have tried to show you that for certain architectures, contraction theory can be maybe an interesting tool for the stability design of such networks. And we have shown that you can basically use such online synthesis model in the context of real robot controllers, where the idea was that we use this as a kind of fast planner. Yeah? So we had seen the talk at the end of the morning that showed that it's very difficult to do the optimal control sufficiently fast to plan complex movements or search over lots of policies in real time. And this helps basically by providing some trajectories that are probably not optimal but close to the optimum, so that you can clean it up in a much faster time than if you have to plan from scratch. This leads me to the last part of my talk, where I want to show you another approach that we are following in terms of learning such complex behavior, which is based on hierarchical probabilistic models. And we applied this in the context of the synthesis of interactive emotional movements. And the work that I show you now was basically done in order to devise an experiment that tests this so-called mirror hypothesis of the representation of emotions. So this is this idea that basically your brain structures that encode actions and emotions partially overlap, and if you see an emotion, you may partially activate also neural structures that you use if you experience this emotion yourself. And also this hypothesis assumes that there's a close link between motor representations and the perception of such actions. If this is true, basically a prediction of this is that if you recognize an action, and you have to basically rate how strong the perceived emotion is, this should be much stronger if you're involved in interactive emotional behavior, because then also your motor representation is activated, and these representations overlap. You should get a much stronger activation, as illustrated by this picture here, than if you are just observing passively without having motor involvement in this situation. In order to measure if this is really true, basically what you need is a very well-controlled way to control the emotion content of such actions in interactive situations. Using methods from computer graphics, of course, we can do this. We can control the emotional expressiveness of emotion by morphing between examples of neutral actions and emotional actions that is shown here. So these are motion captured examples, and then you can mix them with different blending weights, and this way you can very fine-grained control the emotion content. However, classically these methods all are offline. Yeah? So you record basically this motion capture these trajectories, and then you interpolate in some way the trajectories. But if you want to study interactive movements, you need to do this in some way with a controller-like system, yeah, where you online in a dynamical system can generate this. And for this purpose, we try to develop such a generative model that allows to do such fine-grained style control. And this shows you the architecture of the model that we developed. So it's also, today it's very important to have deep architectures. Yeah, so it's deep in the sense that it has multiple hierarchy levels that are trained layer-wise. And the idea is that we learn, as a first step, interactive movements from motion capture data where they are really two interacting actors. Yeah? And then from this we learn a generative model basically for these interactive behaviors. The model basically consists of two modules that model the kinematics of the individual actors by dimension reduction. So we use the Gaussian process latent variable model. So this is basically a nonlinear dimension reduction method. Yeah? So the idea is that yt is here the joint angle of one actor. So there are many of them, like almost 100 degrees of freedom. And then you have a low dimensional space x that is much lower dimensional, only 4 dimensional in our case. And then this mapping here is a nonlinear mapping. You do this for the two interacting people separately. And then we have here a layer that models the movement in these latent spaces together, which is modeled by a so-called Gaussian process dynamical model, which is kind of nonlinear form of an AR process, where you can model nonlinear trajectories. And basically this allows us then to generate this movement in the latent space, and then we can generate from this the fine-grained kinematic movements. Basically, yeah, the whole thing is based on a Gaussian process framework that is probably known to most people here. This gives you again the equations for such a GPDM, Gaussian process dynamical model, where again these nonlinear functions here are regularized by basically drawing them from a Gaussian process. So basically, this architecture really works. So you can see here that it very accurately approximates natural pair interactions. This is original motion capture data. This is a synthesized movement. You see that it's looking very, very similar. We also did psychophysics on that. So you can, for instance, look at the emotion classification rates. If you synthesize such emotional interactions, you get very high classification rates, and then you can do what is called the Turing test of computer graphics. So you show natural motion, directly motion captured movements, and you show synthesized movements and ask people basically which one was the artificial one. And we found that basically it's very hard for subjects to figure out which the artificial one was. So it's almost as natural movement. So this is important because emotion perception is very, very sensitive to artifacts. Yeah? So these type of social communication signals, we are very sensitive. So this was now basically a generative model for such interactive behaviors. Now, basically what we needed was something that, for this experiment, is basically kind of reactive avatar that reacts to what you are doing. So we need basically an avatar that reacts to you. The question is, how do we get now from this pair interaction generative model to such a reactive system that generates an emotional reaction to your behavior? For this, we can exploit the fact that this whole structure here is basically a probabilistic graphical model. And most people here know that in these models you can basically do Bayesian inference on any node. If you specify which nodes you basically observe, then you can make inference on all other nodes. And this is the idea. So basically what we do is we replace one node that is joint angles of the user by an observed variable, and then we can make inference on all other variables, including the behavior of the interacting other agent. And this is really possible, and if you do this, you get something like this. So the red guy here are the online motion captured movements of the user, and the gray guy is the synthesized movements using this graphical model of the interacting other partner of this virtual partner, and we have an additional variable that controls emotional styles. So we can learn this pair interaction with different emotional styles. In this way, we can continuously control if the style of the reaction is happy, as shown here, or sad, as it's shown here. So in this way, we have a fine-grained style control. So this allows us now basically to online synthesize reactive behavior. In practice, if you want now to embed this, for instance, in a VR setup, the problem is that this inverse or Bayesian model inversion, if you do it naively, is extremely slow. For this purpose, you have to add other technical tricks to make it faster. So the one of these tricks is that we made a sparse approximation of the latent space of this model. Another one is that we explicitly implemented inverse mappings here in a direct way using Gaussian process regressions. And if you do this, you can in fact build a virtual avatar that works then in a VR setup. And that's what you see in this movie here. So basically, this is the guy, Nick Taubert, who developed this system. This is what this person sees in the HMD. So it sees its own hand online animated, and this other in the background is this virtual avatar. And with this, then you can basically generate reactive movements with fine control of the emotional style. What we did then is we used this to test our mirror hypothesis. So basically, this is what the real subject saw, that they were tipping on the shoulder of this guy, and then this virtual guy was reacting with different emotional styles. And what we contrasted then was the situation that you are really initiating the movement of the other person, or you just passively observe the same movies. And then basically, this would allow you to measure the amount of change in emotional expressiveness that is caused by your own involvement. And these are the results. So what we found is basically, so what you see here is basically explicit emotion content of the stimulus. This is basically a rating of the emotional expressiveness. So you see here that, of course, the expressiveness rating increases if you have more emotion content in the stimulus. And the two colors here are basically this situation where you just observe or where you're in the closed loop. So what we find basically is a very tiny effect of the active mode. So if you're in the closed loop, you have slightly better or stronger emotion perception. So that means this mirror hypothesis is supported by this experiment, but basically the effect is very small. Yeah? So if this would be the generic mechanism how actions are recognized, one would probably expect a stronger effect. We are presently now doing experiment where we try to increase the emotional coupling between what you do and what the avatar does. So this brings me to my last slide. So this is the conclusions of the second part. So basically this shows that you can use such hierarchical probabilistic architectures, in this case based on GP LVMs for online synthesis of stylized motion with a very high degree of realism. So this thing passed the so-called Turing test of computer graphics. To make this real-time capable, typically you have to add additional technical tricks because generic GPLVM algorithms tend to be slow. And with this setup, we then found a weak support for this mirror hypothesis for social perception. So we find slightly better emotional expressiveness of the same movement that you observe if you're in the closed loop than if you're just passively observing. There's a question remains to be shown or studied in the future why this effect is so small. Yeah, and this brings me to the end, and I thank the many people who were involved in this work. Thank you.
Now, this is probably an embarrassingly basic question, but to understand right back to the beginning where you extracted sources from your kinematic patterns. You probably even said it, but do you have constraints on the types of sources that you allow? And can you do that in a non-rhythmic, say, sequence of different movements? Two different questions.
Basically, we assume segmented data. Yeah. So that means we basically, for instance, segment into steps or individual movements. But it's not, as we showed you the example, that has rhythmic and non-rhythmic movements. So we haven't started to look at, which I think is a very interesting question, to do segmentation and unsupervised learning together. Yeah, because if you think about the movement of the cat in the beginning, I think the problem is that you cannot even take one or segment boundaries for all degrees of freedom together. Yeah, because it may be that the upper body is doing something in a different time frame than the legs, for example. Yeah, or there, even if you look in the individual degrees of freedom, there may be a superposition of two behaviors with different durations. So you would need to have multiple segmentation streams. Yeah. Which we always wanted to start to work on. In principle, you can do this, but one would need also to record appropriate data for that.
Well, the 2/3 power law, as Daniel discussed, would be yet one other way of segmenting, right?
We did actually, we did a lot of work on segmentation that I didn't include. Yeah? Yeah. One of them is actually looking also at this 2/3 power law. So we have an algorithm which was basically derived from segmenting spike trains in bins. Yeah? And this algorithm, it's called Bayesian binning. So it's basically an algorithm that you take in a random time series or some time series, and then you try to find bins with consistent properties, and the algorithm would optimize the number of bins, where the bin boundaries are, and so on. And there what we did is that within the individual segments we made basically polynomial models, and what you find then is basically order 3 or 4. You can also estimate the optimal order then using Bayesian inference. And then you find basically optimum order 4, which would be consistent with 2/3 power law. You get also very human, so we did psychophysics on that, very human-like segmentation of, for instance, these taekwondo forms. Yeah? So there we did experiments where we looked how humans segment them and how these algorithms segment them with different orders of the polynomial and so on. So you get then something that is consistent with the 2/3 power law.
I do have a question which could also be addressed to previous speakers like Nicolas or Motodorov, which is related to the learning that you showed and how it can be useful in robotics. Because and there is this question of generalization, so generating a basis based on optimization or based on measures on humans, and then how do you feel about the fact that you cannot all generalize to all possible situations, or maybe you think that the viability in the world is not so huge that you could address, you could compute priors, learn things enough that you are ready to tackle 99% of cases, or
So this brings me to one point that I forgot to say. So basically in the robotics implementation, the primitives we learn are basically relearned on feasible movements. Yeah? So we start with non-feasible movements and we run the whole dynamic simulator on a set of situations and then relearn the primitives, which leads to the situation that many of the interpolated trajectories then also are feasible, so that one doesn't have to clean up. So this is, I think, one way to embed knowledge from the full dynamics analysis in this lower dimensional representation, where you cannot always 100% guarantee that it's feasible, but where you can maybe get, this is at least the idea behind this approach, that you get at least trajectories that are close to feasible, so that you can then basically work with much less numerical effort to make it feasible. I think what this primitive-based framework does, it generates complex motions in a relatively flexible way. Of course, still, I mean, one has to see how far this scales up. If you now want to have hundreds of situations, the question is, can you extend it to big data approaches? Probably yes. Yeah. So we haven't done studies where you look at very large variety of situations and then try to narrow this down. In computer graphics, there are partially some approaches where people do this data mining on many, many different situations, then by blending manage to cover a broad range of situations with a limited set of representations. But we haven't, using this approach, we haven't explored this. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a question about your last point. So in graphics, people have been playing this game for a while, right? Collect a data set, process it somehow, whether it's a motion graph or a motion field or GP, LVM, like Sergey Levin did one of those for a while. And all these things look good by default because they're essentially playing back human data, and human data looks good. So the way to evaluate them really is to ask how far away from the human data that they recorded they can actually get and still look good. And so, for example, when you show the thing with your Bayesian inference, the question is there a really strong prior that's peaked at, you know, standing up and shaking your hand, and the thing couldn't really do something else even if it wanted to? Or was that a genuine sort of result of inference done actually?
I mean, in this case, we basically compared against sequences doing the same behavior from real motion capture. So it was a discrimination if you can detect it. It's non-natural, right? So we didn't show a completely different category of motion and then ask, is this human or non-human? They are really funny. It's not a trivial question, actually. So it's not like, even in the perception, it's not like the more realistic you make your stimulus, the more human-like it looks. So we have another study together with Albert and other people in my lab where we used in a big robotics grant robot controller algorithms to basically do reaching in such a double-step paradigm, right, where the target jumps and then you have to correct. And then we have, I don't know, the algorithm by Orde and Stefan Scharl's type of movement primitive algorithm, and so on. And basically what comes out, and we have the real behavior. And if you basically show this on a robot, what is rated as most human-like is not the real human behavior, but it's the one that is smoothest. Yeah? So in some way, and this is even true if you don't show it on a robot, but if you show it on a human avatar. So there's some complex, or I don't know if it's complex, maybe it's even very dumb mechanism what you perceive as human-like. So I mean, I'm a vision person, so I wouldn't be too surprised if the vision system has very stupid priors, what it sees as nice motion, which are not related to sophistication of motor control, yeah, that you do all the degrees of freedom really exactly right. So it's a tricky business. I mean, with real robots, of course, you have all these other problems that you have to retarget, that you have physical constraints, that also for the HRP2, of course, you have to rescale a lot of things to make it feasible, starting from the step lengths and so on, where you then can, where this correspondence problem with humans becomes highly non-trivial. Yeah.
About the computation of your primitives of the function ISP, because you assume linear combination. But do you look if you get better result by deformation of those functions? So, for example, when one has a motion.
The deformations of the primitive.
Of this function. For example, you spoke about addition, there is such kind of primitive, and the boundary-wise have exactly the same shape. So you could not look at linear combination of them, but to try to understand it is better to deform them.
You mean nonlinear combination?
Yeah.
We didn't look at, or basically the anechoic mixture is nonlinear in the sense that you have this translation, but it's not nonlinear in the sense how you, in terms of the weight, mixing weights, and we didn't look at nonlinear combinations there. So I cannot say this.
Okay, then